What is up, everybody? Mr. Curtis here. Welcome to unit number 6, part 1 on the world wars. And this is section D. Yeah, D. On the start of World War II. So if you remember in the last video, we kind of talked about the buildup of the Nazis in Germany and how they were going to build up their military. We also talked about the militarism in Japan. And then as well, we talked about the United States and how they're creating this New Deal to try and solve their economic crisis. We're going to fast forward just kind of a year or two. So 1932 is when the Nazis take over in Germany. Hitler's building up his military. And what obviously, when countries build up their military, it usually is a sign that some kind of aggression is going to happen. Now, before we get into the aggression here, I just want to point out that the League of Nations is an organization created after World War I that we talked about. The goal is to promote peace and make sure war doesn't happen. And what the League of Nations is going to do, and pretty much everything I tell you here in this slide, is that they do nothing. They are a weak organization. Their main focus is to promote peace. So what they generally do is let people take over countries so they don't have to go to war. And by the League of Nations, I mean all the countries, specifically Britain and France. So we have Germany on the move being aggressive. We have Japan on the move being aggressive. And let's start with Japan over here. Japan in 1931 is going to invade this area in northern East Asia, is Manchuria, and then they're going to come down and invade China as well as an area down here eventually in Southeast Asia, which is Vietnam right here. And the French have been there. It's a French colony. So the Japanese are going to kick out the French. This is all should have been stopped by the League of Nations, but the League of Nations doesn't really care. They allow it to happen. And when you allow someone to do something, when you want to avoid a conflict and you allow them to do something, it's called appeasement. For example, you might be mad at someone for not texting you back, but you want to avoid a conflict over it, so you just kind of let it slide. That's appeasement. Mom, dad, someone tells you to clean up your room. Their room's a mess as well. You want to have a fight with them about it, but you just let it go and you just say, you mumble under your breath and you walk away and you clean up your room. That's appeasement. And what the League of Nations is going to do here is they're going to appease Germany and Japan and let them take over these countries in a hope that it will avoid war and we don't have to go into World War II. So the thought is always, if we let them take this over, they won't take anything else over. So it's like, I'll clean up my room because I don't want to have to hear my parents yap in my ear anymore about it. This is Germany over here. Germany is in the brown. Germany is also going to expand out. They're going to take over Austria, Czechoslovakia, Slovakia over here. A lot of these are the new countries that were created after World War I. Many of these countries have German-speaking people in it, especially up here in Austria. So Hitler's trying to create a German Reich or a German empire. So he thinks he should take over these countries. So the League of Nations should stop him, but the League of Nations is weak. Keep that in the back of your mind. League of Nations is totally unsuccessful. So with this buildup, we're obviously getting to the point where something bad is going to happen. I want to point out one quick reminder as a side note before we get into like the actual World War II stuff, is Russia left World War I early, and that was in 1917, and they go through a revolution. I mentioned this in the World War I video. They are going to become a communist country. We are going to come back to this and kind of fill in some of the gaps here with specifically Russia, aka the Soviet Union. But I just want to point it out here. Nothing fits really well here. It's a little confusing. There's no perfect way to do this. So we're going to talk about the world wars, and then we're going to kind of come back to the Russia piece. But this is the leader of Russia during World War II. His name is Joseph Stalin. You may have heard of him before. And this is what we're looking at for what the Soviet Union at the start of World War II is. So they're right on the cusp here of Poland. So they share a border with Poland, as does Germany. So kind of coming back here, here's Poland. This is Germany. The Soviet Union is over here. What leads to the start of this war, the first kind of event that starts this war, is Germany invades Poland in 1939. So again, Germany has expanded here. They're going to invade Poland in 1939. And when they invade Poland in 1939, Britain and France are kind of like, that's enough. We've appeased them long enough. We need to do something about it. So Britain and France declare war on Germany. When they declare war on Germany, Germany decides after they defeat Poland, which they do very easily. Poland is a new country created after World War I. Britain and France, Germany takes their soldiers and a lot of their soldiers and invades France. And they successfully invade France. It's actually a pretty quick invasion, and they beat France in pretty much 6 months. In this process, Germany then, after they beat France, decides to invade. 2 years later, they invade the Soviet Union. And the problem that they run into in the Soviet Union is they leave in June of 1941. It's a lot. They should have left earlier in the spring, but they left too late. And by the time they invade from Poland into the Soviet Union, they get right outside the city of Moscow, which is the main city in the Soviet Union, and they kind of get stuck. They get bogged down in the wintertime, and the winter comes, and it's a rough winter, and they can't invade any further, which really, this is the furthest extent that they get. And following the winter of 1941 and 1942, Russia starts pushing back Germany into this area. In the process of all of this, in December of 1941, Japan bombs Pearl Harbor. Japan had felt like the United States was expanding too much in the Pacific region. The United States had also cut off trade with Japan. They had stopped trading oil and other natural resources with Japan. And Japan felt like the U.S. was really kind of infringing on some of their trade rights and some other economic interest in the Pacific Islands. So Japan bombs Pearl Harbor. This really leads to two kind of alliances as we break out. One is called the Axis powers. The idea was that the Earth will spin, not literally, figuratively, on the axis of these three countries. And the other is we have the Allies. So anything in blue up here is the Allies. The black is the Axis powers. And then the red up here is the Soviet Union, which is going to turn blue. They join kind of a little late. They wait until after the Nazis invade them. So these are two sides in the war. One thing that's similar to this war, as to World War I, where there's a lot of comparisons here that we need to make between World War I and World War II, is World War II is going to be another total war. We're going to see a lot of propaganda posters. We're going to ask women to join the factory work as men go off and fight. So a lot of women are going to leave the home, as they were in the 1930s and early 40s, and they're going to go and work in the factories. Very similar to World War II, just like World War I. But just like World War I, when the men return back from the war, they're going to retake these jobs, and women are going to be asked to return back to their domestic sphere in the home. Also, kind of one thing that's a little different is people in the United States and in Britain are going to be encouraged to plant victory gardens in back of your house to grow your own food. Not all of your food, but enough that you don't have to buy groceries, and those groceries, those mass-produced foods, can go to the front to feed people. We also have the Rosie the Riveter, United States, we can do it. One thing that's a little bit different in this war, and this is also part of total war, but this is a little bit different than World War I, is we're going to see the inclusion of civilians as casualties in this war. World War I was really on the Eastern Front and the Western Front, fought between soldiers. A lot of people died. This war is going to be a war fought by killing civilians, intentionally killing innocent civilians in the hope that you break the morale of the country and the country will turn against the leader. So, for example, the United States government is going to firebomb the city of Dresden in Germany, as well as other cities in Germany. So night after night after night, they are going to bomb the city of Dresden. They're going to bomb Berlin, and they're going to just bomb it, not caring who the bombs hit. They're going to hit wherever they can. But the goal is that if you live in Germany, you're a Nazi, therefore we are going to destroy your city. So this is some images from Dresden, from the firebombing by the United States. Really kind of horrific images. The U.S. does the same thing in Tokyo, in Japan. On May 9th and May 10th of 1945, the U.S. has nonstop bombing for almost 48 hours straight. And this is kind of a picture. These are the amount of bombs that we're talking about. So we have these new technologies where we have planes that can drop bombs, as opposed to in World War I, where we just had planes that kind of went over and looked for enemy areas. This is actually where bombs that are going to drop these are planes that drop these bombs that are going to cause huge destruction. I mean, we're demolishing cities in the Axis powers. So we have firebombing cities. The other thing that we're going to include is we have this kind of horrific human rights violations against civilians. Again, this is part of the total war, but just some horrible, awful stuff that we really didn't see in World War I. And because of nationalism between both sides, really, but especially among the Japanese, there's this extreme pride and there's this hatred towards the Chinese. Remember, the Chinese have been the center of civilization forever. They've always kind of been the big brother and dominated Japan culturally, economically, and they've really been on a stronger footing. And for the first time in history, following the Meiji Restoration, Japan is stronger than China. So the Japanese are really taught and told, as we invade China, we want you to really take out a lot of this anger and show the Chinese people who the Japanese are and the strength of the Japanese. Japanese soldiers, period is going to be called the Rape of Nanjing. And Nanjing is a city in China. And the Japanese are told, we're going to try and, I want you to kill as many Chinese people as possible. We don't care if they're innocent or not. We're going to see a lot of soldiers who just go around and behead people. They're actually rewarded for the beheading. It's competition between these Japanese soldiers to see how many Chinese you can behead. You can see just bodies just thrown out here. Women are going to be raped. Chinese women are going to be raped by Japanese soldiers. It's going to be encouraged by commanding officers to rape Chinese women, and then after you rape them, to kill them. Babies are going to be killed. Just horribly horrific, awful stuff. Really one of these things that separate World War II from past wars is this just human rights violations. Also, obviously, we have this anti-Semitism or hatred towards Jews that everyone really, I know you've learned this at some point, we'll talk more about this in class, but just a quick little overview. This anti-Semitism in Nazi Germany starts before the war. It's the first laws that really, first steps against the Jewish people are called the Nuremberg laws. And these are laws that are going to segregate Jews and non-Jews. Jews and non-Jews in Germany can't marry. They can't have children together. They're not supposed to be alone. They're not supposed to be in any way, shape, or form together. Also, it kind of says who is a Jew and who isn't. So if you have any Jewish ancestry, you are considered to be Jewish. You might not practice Judaism. You might be Christian, but if your family has Jewish blood, you are Jewish. They're going to start doing calibrations to try and figure out if someone's Jewish. They're going to measure the width of heads, sides of head, front of head, width of the eyes, how far apart they are, to try and figure out. Maybe you don't even realize you have Jewish ancestry because it was your great-grandfather who was Jewish. We're also going to have stories. This is a children's story about a Jewish pedophile who goes around to schools and tries to molest little girls. And we're going to read these stories to kids. And when these kids hear these stories, it's going to almost be the original form of brainwashing. And obviously, as things progress in the war, by 1942, we're going to see the start of the concentration camps. Again, we'll talk more about this in class. Just a couple images here. This is coming into the camp. A lot of people, when you arrived in the camp, they would tell you, maybe they were going to clean you up and have you shower. And then when you got into this area, if you were weak, they would drop in this Zyklon B to poison people, to kill people. They then take the bodies and cremate them. Eventually they get to the point where they're killing so many people per day, they can't cremate the bodies. So we see a lot of mass graves that are dug. Food is very minimal within there. I think the average caloric intake was 300 to 500 calories a day. So the average person should be getting 2,000 to 2,500. So you see these very thin guys who are, and this is the sleeping conditions in the concentration camps. This is the person who wrote the book Night, if you've ever read Night, Elie Wiesel. And then over here, we also see human experiments done in the camps. Again, a lot of this we'll talk about in class. Just a quick overview, just to remind you if you're ever reviewing this stuff, some of the stuff we're looking at. In the Holocaust as a whole, we're going to see 11 million people die. 6 million of those 11 are Jewish. The other 5 million are people who are prisoners. We have other people who were captured during war. We have people who were Catholic who tried to rebel. We also have people who were gypsies. We have people who were gay. A lot of different groups of people who are going to be included in this. So just want to point out in this that this is part of the total war that's different from World War I, in that civilians are completely included in this, which is a major problem. So what we'll do in the next videos, we'll get into kind of the wrap up. Again, we'll talk more about a lot of this stuff in class, but a little overview. As always, if you have questions, write it down. Let me know. Have a good day.